Alright, we're in a parts hunt here trying to find a correct rear end for the Trans Am.
And this is a rare situation. Usually junkyards won't even let you go back in them because you could get hurt back here just slipping and hitting a chunk of iron, and they'd have, you know, lawsuit against them. But they're pretty relaxed here. But in order to get parts, you gotta really want that part bad, because you gotta cut a tree down that's growing through it or jack up on something and it's just mud everywhere. And this stuff is really old, and you gotta walk over puddles and stuff. And we're trying to find a rear end, so all these rear ends are sitting down in the frickin' mud, and I don't even know if it's, I think we saw one over there last time.
Oh, he said there was one right down this aisle here somewhere. Blue or orange, he said.
But you're thinking, why would they even save this crap? It should have been scrapped out a long time ago. But when you're back here, it brings back memories, because most of your buddies had vehicles like this and you had fun in them. And here's one. This is a later model. This is a 6-cylinder or something, a turbocharged.
Turbo hood, yeah. Yeah, the wraparound window. When did they start that? 74?
These things actually moved out pretty damn good.
This was a Stealth, wasn't it?
Yeah, Dodge Stealth or the Mitsubishi 3000. They had a 6-cylinder with 2 turbos. What's this right here? That's got your glass. Oh, it's a wraparound glass.
Got a lot of Firebirds and Camaros in here.
Well, there were so many of them. When you were in high school, everybody you knew had a Camaro or a Firebird. So this you don't even want to look at?
No, it's
Too new?
the date code would be wrong.
Sinking.
This is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Because not only do you need a correct date code, but you need correct gear ratio code on it. Well, it's stamped into the tube.
Oh.
And then the date code is actually cast on the center section. Look at this old truck. It's pretty rotten.
Look at inside the bus. How people would store shit in buses.
These junkyard guys said we're nuts for even walking out here.
I can't believe they even allow them to put them in a marsh. Think of all the stuff that's leaching into the ground. Got them emblems on the bottom of the fender.
Our Cutlass project came to a screeching halt because all our doors are pretty much rusted out. Out of 5 doors, none of them were good.
This is what's funny is this shit would always shrink up. These little corners are hard to get.
Surprising that's even still on there. Here's the Firebird we're looking at. You just see the floor is completely gone in it. Axle's still in it.
Get the nose off.
There's a big chip out of it.
We'll fix that.
There's a spring all the way up to the top of the trunk. Typical trunk lid from Wisconsin. So we're going to try to clean this up from the front. But even if it's got all the right stuff, I probably still don't want it because if you look at it, it's really pitted and in tough shape.
Rough as a cob.
You gonna snap that out of there?
It's a snap.
Coming.
This is ridiculous. You Did you ever see that Bugatti they found on the bottom of the lake, and it's still all rusted to hell, and it went for $1 million? This is close to it. A lot of times when stuff is sunk to the bottom and it don't get oxygen, it rusts slower than when it gets wet and dries out, and wet and dry out. Oxidation can happen.
There, the code's gonna be right in front of that exhaust pipe. So I'm gonna put the camera down for a minute. We'll try to get that out of there. Alright, you can see the condition of this rear end here.
Put some light on it.
And we did find the numbers. Looks like GZG. I believe this to be an open rear end. Not the stampings we're looking for. Probably wouldn't have run this rear end anyway.
When you do this stuff, you got to think like a junkyard ape. You know, anything you got to do to get at it. And if you see guys that work at junkyards, when they want something, they wreck everything else. You know, they'll just cut the back end of the car off, get in here with a piece of equipment, rip it off, and then the rest of the stuff got ruined. You know, whatever makes their job easy for that day. It's really easy to identify these cars that we're looking for because the back window was a lot cooler looking, but it left this whole area like a blind spot. So when you were looking over your shoulder, somebody could, you know, a guy on a motorcycle could be right here. So usually when you had cars like this, if you put your directionals on, you gassed it and moved over because somebody could be sitting right here in your blind spot. You got to be careful not to trip over stuff. And this thing's got trees growing all around.
While I was looking at numbers, it seems that the Camaro rear ends basically have the same stampings, and as far as I can tell, there's no way to differentiate a Camaro rear end from a Pontiac rear end.
This is what happened to a lot of cars when they started getting rusty in Wisconsin. My buddy's leaf springs, he did a big hole shot, and the leaf springs were coming right through the floors. And you'd have to pound it down, add more, you know, sheet metal on top of it. That's why a lot of guys would have a roll bar that planted right on top of that leaf spring pocket. And you had your subframe connector that would tie to it. Because, I mean, every time you're hitting a bump, it's flexing that sheet metal. And either in the trunk or up in front, it would start working its way up. Wreck the floor pan. That's crazy shit in the old 70s. Velour, fuzzy. This is, what is his name? Huggy Bear's car. Oh, sauce.
Scraping the undercoating off.
And rust.
You can kind of see what's left of the stampings, but most of it's rusted off. This one's pretty much unreadable.
I would say the same thing goes for any of the parts that you want to find on your car in Wisconsin. Just like buying a car, you got to get the parts from down south too. It's just too ratty. It's just unbelievable that they'd even put them back here because they're just going to rust away. Then you try to scrap them out for iron and they weigh half as much because Mother Nature is going to take everything. Yeah, when I was 16 years old, I had a 1940 Ford, and all I needed was the windshield wiper, you know, things. They had little chain drive on them that went, you know, to the motor, and I got them off of, they had a whole string of like 32 all the way to 48s, you know, in a whole row. And I'm going to see if they're still there, rusting away. Hurt. When we were 16, we all smoked pot. And that was back in the 70s. Everybody was doing it. And one of my friend's dads owned a, you know, where you take a dead person, what do you call them? Funeral home. And a guy had died and they wanted to bring him back to the cemetery in our town, but he lived way up north. So his dad says, be careful, this is a brand new hearse. Go up, north, pick up this body, and well, my buddies were smoking pot all the way up there. They were high as a kite. The Cadillac was really nice, you know, like a brand new 73 hearse. And they pick up the body all right. They put it in the back, and they're driving. A lot of times the highway will be really high at the on-ramp to the freeway. And this guy gasses it around the corner, and they didn't have the back door closed good enough. And the whole casket with the guy's body went rolling off the end and down in this, you know, down where the, you know, lower area where this on-ramp was. And they had to take the body out of the casket first with nobody seeing them. Luckily, there was hardly any people on the road back then. They get the body up first, then they had to slide this casket back up. There wasn't a scratch on it. It went right over the guardrail and just rode in nice high grass. So they got the casket back in the, they got this lifting device on the back, and then they had to put the body back in it, get the thing in there, and nobody caught him. There wasn't a scratch in the casket. Brought it back and never told his dad. They call him a B-body Mopar. It's probably like a Coronet 500. I got the back glass to that, if anybody needs it. Somebody hacked out the gas filler. Look at how they can open it. Jeez. The only thing good is the valance where the package tray is. These demons rusted out really fast. They were started out as a Valiant. By 1970, they were pretty cool. You could get them with a 340. Most of them came with 318s. But it was a lightweight car.
Oh, that's a Twister?
Yeah.
Was that an option, or?
Well, that was the more high performance one. And then the stripe usually had a twisty look to it. There's another Coronet right there. This must be their whole Mopar. 71. Well, it would be a Roadrunner. That's probably a Satellite. It's a 4-door. If you hit pay dirt, it would have a big wing on the back. As a kid, I used to go around with my dad, but he had a big, giant propane tank on the back, and we'd go from house to house. But a lot of farmers and little hardware stores would have a tank up above ground, and then guys would drive around with these big trucks that had fuel in them, and then you'd hook up a pump, probably came out the bottom, and you open up this hydraulic gate. This was a safety device, so while it's going down the road, if somebody smashed into the back, you wouldn't have gas going all over the place. But this brings back old memories. They don't do stuff like this anymore. Remember the story about the guy getting his head gonged around in here? This is the same kind of van. When you're driving it and you go over a turn, your feet are actually hanging over the front end. When guys that got used to these and they drive, they could be like tailgating somebody and it felt like your foot was right on their rear bumper. And they just got a straight 6 in them right now, but a lot of guys would put a V8 in them. This is called the doghouse. And a lot of times, you know, to fit them in, the engine had to even be back further. So you can see how when you rev the clutch and dump it, the whole front end is just a straight axle with leaf springs. Whole front end would stretch up. But my buddy would just keep them with a straight 6. And he says, they wouldn't let us into a restaurant one time. And you'd move a little bit and then slam on the front brakes. And the front end would be down and the back end would be up. And then you'd do a brake torque because it was automatic. And then you get one wheel spin and it would just smoke forever. Every once in a while you should just sell it for, well, scrap prices are down now. But if you just had your yard apes ripping off the aluminum manifolds and, you know, separating, it's ridiculous.
What kind of engine is this? Let's see if we can identify it. I don't recognize it.
This thing?
Yeah.
It's a Ford. When you see an old Ford like a 390, the intake manifold took up an expansive amount of area, and they were cast iron. So if you had a, you know, like a 65 Fairlane with a 390 in it, and you just switched over to aluminum, half the valve cover covered the intake manifold. And, you know, it's called a FE model. You could have a low rise, a medium rise, or a big tall tunnel port, which is their highest performance. But you can see this area, how much, I mean, when you tried lifting the intake manifold off them, your feet would come off the ground. You needed 2 people to do it.
Looks like we're in the old area now.
65 Riviera Cadillac.
Oh, he's turds galore.
Some kind of animal was big. Holy shit. These were really cool cars. If you ever see the movie Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. No, this is a 64. 65 had these clamshells that the headlights would open up and hide away. This stuff is the same as when I was a kid. Golden Power.
How long would you say this stuff's been sitting
Well, I
here?
was 16 years old, and now I'm 59, so that would be like 40 years. 55 Ford, 55 Ford. All these are Fords here. Whole roll. 57 Chevy. But usually in the junkyard, you got the 4 doors. Nobody wanted 4 doors. But sometimes there were parts that would work, you know, for both. And, you know, window trim and shit like that. Anytime you see portholes, you know it's a Buick. A lot of guys would take those portholes off and put them on different cars if they're making a custom. You can see a Buick, they always had big grills. Did you ever see the cartoon Cars? I don't like cartoons, but my buddy says, you should watch it. And the actors that were the voices for the cars were perfect for each item, and the faces would move, you know, the grills and the headlights. That was kind of cool. The thing with vans is nobody wanted them with windows. You wanted this all closed off. Then what went on inside the van, nobody knew what was going on. Usually you had like a crank out vent, or you had these windows that would pop and smoke would be billowing out of them. You'd walk past one and the place smelled like a marijuana field on fire. Oh, and it's got a custom ignition on it. These things were front wheel drive. Olds Tornado, and then Cadillac had the Eldorado. But my buddy had one of these, and you just gas it, and they had so much torque, and the front end would be smoking. For as big a car as they were, it was really just a 2-seater because the roof line went down. People in the back would be hunched over. It was a cool car. Then there was a company called Kelmark, and you take this whole front, you know, well, the engine and tranny was for front wheel drive, but they'd put it behind, and it was a fiberglass body with gull wing doors, and it would just pull a wheelie because it had so much torque. I don't know how it steered, never got a ride in one, but they really look cool. And, you know, when you could probably still go on Kelmark and look it up. It was a kit car that used Olds drivetrain. It was cool. It's a CD ignition box, and back in the day when they found out about, you know, transistors and stuff like that, they could take your points ignition and that would just be a triggering device, so it really didn't burn out the points, like carry the load. What it would do is step it up on that, and you'd get like 50,000 volts to your spark. If you guys are ever in a chance to pick up an old milk truck, bread truck, diaper truck, whatever you want to call them, the company was called Divco, and guys will slam them down to the ground, they put custom paint on them, or they leave them real rustic, and they show up at car shows, and they got pinstriping equipment, or whatever whatever their trade is, you know, and then they cruise around with them. But they bring back old memories when the milk used to be delivered right to your house. 78.
Pretty rough.
The floor's in better shape than the ones we were looking at. So you're seeing the sign right now, Jack's Auto Ranch. This thing's been around for years and years. And he's telling us to go to Zeb's in Tigerton, Wisconsin. They get stuff shipped up from out west, so it should be in better shape.